This is Dr. Kavita Singh, Associate Professor in Department of Civil Engineering in Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. So today we are going to discuss a topic called as raster data model. So what is raster data model? So till now we have discussed in the previous lecture about the spatial data, non-spatial data, raster data, vector data. So raster and vector, we already know what is raster and what is vector. So if you remember, we have discussed raster data is the data which is represented in the form of a grid format, and the vector data is the data which is represented in the form of point, line and polygon. Okay, so today we are going to learn about what are the different types of raster data and what is raster data model, how it is represented in the form of different types of model, that we'll be discussing today. So let us start with the contents. So our contents will be for today's lecture: GIS data models, raster data representation, raster GIS model, types of raster GIS model, grid model and in-grid model and map model. So these all we are going to discuss in this lecture. So let us start with this GIS data models. So what are the GIS data models? So the construction of models of spatial form can be taken as a series of stages of data abstraction. So GIS data models means there are different kinds of model for representation, we can say representation. So there are different models are to be presented. So by applying this abstraction process, the GIS designer moves from the position of observing the geographical complexity of the real world to one of the stimulating them to the computer. So in the previous lecture, if you remember, we have just learned about the theoretical framework of GIS. So that is about from the real world to map. Okay. So what we are going to do is converting the real world information to map. Okay, so this information we are going to convert, and in the form of the models it will be represented. So in the form of GIS data models, it will be represented like how it will be represented in the form of either grid format, either the point, line and polygon format. So this process involves the identifying the spatial features from real world that are the interest in the context of an application. So reporting the conceptual model by an appropriate spatial model. This involves choosing between one or two approaches, that is called as raster or vector. So representation of these data models are represented in the form of raster or vector. So here we are going to discuss about the raster one. So selecting an appropriate spatial data structure to store the model within the computer. The spatial data structure is the physical way in which the entities are coded for the purpose of storage and manipulation. So spatial data structure is what? What are the spatial data? Spatial data itself is raster and vector. Okay. So here we are discussing about the raster. So raster data is also, it's a spatial data, it's a structure, is a physical way in which entities are coded for the purpose of storage and manipulation. How we can store and manipulate the data, that we can do. So this is how the data is represented. So these are the stages of the GIS models. So here is our real world, we can say. Real world means actually how the world looks like. So from real world it is captured. Okay, so you can say here it is captured. So captured in the form of map, right? Later this map is converted into raster. Here is the raster. So and vector. So here is the vector. So raster representation will be in the grid formats or in the form of DN numbers. DN numbers. So what are DN numbers? DN numbers are representation of the each grid cells in the form of different numbers. Okay. Now here if you see the vector, vector is represented in the form of point, line and polygon. Okay. This is how we represent here, and finally it is shown in the form of computer system. Now raster data representation. So in raster representation, the terrain is divided into number of parcels or quantized the space into units. a parcel or a unit is called as a grid cell. Okay, parcel or a unit is called as a grid cell. So the data which is captured here, it is represented in the form of grid cells. So now this grid cells is also called as a parcel. So one piece of land is known as a parcel, which is represented in the form of a grid cells. Now raster data structures do not provide precise locational information because geographic space is now divided into discrete grids as much as we divide a checkboard into the uniform squares. So instead of representing points with their absolute locations, they are represented as a single grid cell. So we can represent in the instead of point single grid cell instance. Suppose here there are two maps, similar maps. So if in the vector, if you show this point, so this point, if you want to represent in the raster data, so it will be represented in the single grid cell. So one grid cell, if I just capture like this, so this point is represented as the point in the raster, whereas vector in the point. So same the line, if I show like this line if I want to represent in the grid cell, so the grid cell will be represented like this color, this grid will be captured, this grid will be captured, this grid will be captured, like this it will be represented. So in the raster it will be represented like this, same the line. So if it is a polygon, if I draw a square polygon, so square polygon here with a line we can see, but whereas if you want to represent in the raster, it will cover 4 grid cells. Okay, like this it was represented. So in grid based or raster GIS, there are two general ways of including attribute data for each entity. So the simplest is to assign a single number representing an attribute like a class of land cover or for each grid cell location. By positioning these numbers, we ultimately are allowing the position of the attribute value to act as the default location for the entity. Now, for example, if you assign a code of 10 to represent water, then list this as the first number. Code of 10 represent water. For example, let us say this is like we have a map here. So code of 10 in sense, we have different grid cells here. Okay, this is the grid cell. Now, if you want to represent each, for example, here it is given 10 is for water. So wherever 10 is there, 10, 10, 10, 10. So wherever 10 is available, that means it represents water. Like that, if there is number 9. So wherever we represent 9, 9 like this, so it may be a vegetation. So this is represented in the form of grid cells in the form of numbers or colors. Same the way you can represent in the color also, that will be discussing when we are discussing about the type of models. So in the X or column direction and the first in the Y or row direction, by default the upper left grid cell is the location of a portion of the earth representing the water. Now this is how the raster is represented and this is how the vector is represented. Now raster, if you see, this is the same map here. So here building it is showing as a drawing. Okay, we are showing the building as a drawing. So this same building, it's a point location. Actually, it is a location. So we can say it's a location. So this point location, if you want to show in the raster data, so in raster data, you can just show this building as a one grid cell. So one grid cell is captured here. So that one grid cell is captured. That grid cell is known as a point. Now line feature, we can just represent the line feature, this like a grid cell. Same thing is represented in the different grids, right? Same line is represented in the single grids. Now this polygon is represented in the grids. So this is how in raster it is represented with the form of grids. Same thing if you want to show in the vector, it is represented as a point, line or polygon. Okay, so always remember raster data when it is representing, we have to show in the grid format. And it is not we are showing, it is directly converted because raster data is either scanned data or either captured data through camera or sensors, right? Now GIS data models and data structure. So we have two data models here, that is raster data model and the vector data model. So today we are discussing only the raster data model. In the coming lectures we will be discussing about the vector data model. So raster data model, the simplest approach we can say here is, the simplest approach of structuring spatial data is to use grid cells to represent quantized portions of the earth, which is called as grid based GIS or raster GIS. So it's a very simple approach to represent the data. Simply we can In a simple method, you can just represent the data in the grid format, and it is converted to grid-based GIS or raster GIS. So in the raster GIS, a range of different methods are used to encode a spatial entity for storage and representation in the computer. Now, this is how a simple, I just told you, it is a simple way of representation. So in a computer system, these are the different ways it is represented. So first one, you can see here a simple raster data structure, entity model, cell values, file structure. So the whole raster data is represented like this. The entity model, it is represented in the covering the grid cells. So this grid cells, wherever it covers, it may be here, it may be here, right? The same thing you can see here. This is what it is showing. I think this is what it is showing, like this. From here, it's showing like this, from here to here, like this, and it is covered here. So this the same entity model is showing in the form of numbers. So this we can say as cell values, and here file structure. So here file structure, it is showing like this. You can see one value, you can see here. This is the value. This is the value. Okay, you can see the same thing, it is represented in the form of a entity model, like colored one, and the other one you can see here in the form of numbers. So wherever 0 is there, 0 means no feature. Okay, so here is the feature. Same thing, it is represented as a file structure, zeros and one. Wherever you can see the 0, there is no feature. Wherever you can see 1, there is a feature. This is how it is shown in the form of grid cells. Okay. Now, method of coding raster data, the cells in which line of the image is mirrored by equivalent row or of numbers in the structure. The line of the file structure indicates the number of rows, the number of columns, the maximum cell value in the image. Now here we have a coding of features in raster GIS. So different coding of features in raster GIS. What are the different coding of features? You can see here, like number one, A, B, C, we have different way. Like here, this features you can see it is empty, and this one is covered with colors. Now same thing, empty one, here it is showing in the form of number 1, and this is 2. This is 2 here. Same thing if you want to see here represented. In the previous slide also you have seen the same. It is represented like this. Okay, so 2 is a similar one. If I say 1, it is a similar one. If I say 3, 3 is the similar one. Similar feature, you can say. Similar feature which is represented in A, B and C. Now types of raster GIS model. So the grid-based GIS spatial data can be stored, manipulated, analyzed, referenced basically in any one of the 3 methods of models. So these 3 models are grid model, we say it as lunar or MAGI model, or in-grid model or map model. So these are the 3 models. One is grid, in-grid and map. So these 3 models are known as the raster data model, raster GIS data model. So let us understand what is the raster grid model. So all of these models are used as a grid cell values. So their attributes, coverage, corresponding legends, these models are developed depending upon the requirements from time to time. And based on the applications of interest, availability of softwares and other related information, any one of the above model can be selected for the execution of the particular GIS project. So based on the application of the interest, the models are applied here. So based on the availability of the software as well as models are selected and execution of the particular GIS project, these models are used. So there are a number of ways of forcing a computer to store the reference, the individual grid cells, their attributes, coverage, names and legends. Now grid model. So grid model, let us understand the first and the foremost model for the representation of raster data is grid model. Okay, grid model. So the method of storing, manipulating, analyzing the grid based data was first conceptualized by an attempt to develop a grid model. So what is grid model? In this method, each grid is cell is referenced and addressed individually. For example, if this is the grid, so each cell is represented individually. Okay, now individually means there will be a color here. Okay, there will be a color here. Suppose this is vegetation, red color, let us say vegetation. So wherever this red color I will fill, this all red color will be vegetation, right? Red color is all vegetation. Like this, if there is yellow color if I say here, so this all yellow color, this all yellow color, if I fill the grid like this, if I fill the grid, so this may be a water body, you can say water body. Like this, if I just want to show the other color, let us say blue, or let us say here, blue color, blue color is settlement. Okay, so this with the colors of representation with different colors, we can just tell us that each grid is individually represented. So with vegetation red color, and here water body I showed in yellow color, settlement I showed in blue color. So wherever these colors are associated, so this color represent individually different kinds of theme. Okay, so it is associated with the identity positioned grid cells in the other coverages, rather like a vertical column of grid cells, each dealing with a separate theme. So each is having a separate theme. So red color is the vegetation, blue color is the settlement, and yellow color is the water body. So each one is having a separate theme. So comparisons between the coverage are therefore performed on a single column at a time. For example, to compare soil attributes in one coverage with vegetation attributes, in second coverage land use land cover attributes, and in third coverage each x and y location must be examined individually. So a soil grid cell location must be examined individually. So this is what I was telling you about. So this is the, you can see here, clay, loam, marsh, wet clay, dry clay, sand. So each grid is covered with different colors. If I say clay, so wherever we can see this legend, so this is clay. Okay, and these all grids are loam, and these grids are marsh. Okay, and this is wet clay, this is dry clay, and left over this one is sand. So each one has having the individual colors which are representing a different entity here. So here in this example also you can see here green agriculture, red residential, lake red, as I showed you in the previous one. So the same thing I will show you here. So this is the grid is created like this. This is the grid created like this. Now in this grid, if I'm need to show the green one, so green one is agriculture. So wherever the G if I write, so agriculture, red is the residential. So residential if I want to show, so residential if I want to show, so that will be red color will be showing here. So here this grid I will just cover it, and it is like residential. Okay, this is residential. Now red is residential here. Now B here, let us say blue. So blue color here. I will cover this all, and this will be like totally the grids are covered, and this is what blue is lake, right? Next is if I want to show road. So road, if I want to show, I may show in yellow grid. So this is the road here, which is shown like this. Each grid is covered. Now here it is road, right? This is residential. Okay. Now leftover is agriculture. So leftover is agriculture. If I want to show a leftover agriculture, so I may show in the green color, right? So we can just convert this all in green color. So this is all, if I cover all these grids, this all grids will be converted to agriculture. So this is agriculture, this is agriculture, this one is agriculture, this one is agriculture. Okay. So this all grids which are converted like this, this all comes under agriculture, right? So this is how the grid model is formed. So grid model is represented in different colors. Okay. Now in-grid model. So with a slight modification of the checkboard analog, the second basic raster data model, that is in-grid data model. So this model is also used as a early GIS system. Instead, we can use the number red squares to represent water, 0 to black square and indicate the absence of water. Just now we have seen here with the colors. Now same thing we can represent with numbers 0 or 1, 0 or 1. So for representing anything, like how can we represent a thematic map of land use that contains say 4 categories, namely recreation, agriculture and industry and residences. So if you want to create this, so suppose this is the grid. Now grid, we have created the grid like this. Now this grid, instead of colors, the number will be shown. So if I want to show recreation, so let us say 1, 1, 1. So wherever I can see 1, so 1 is what? Recreation. Same the way agriculture, 2, 2. So wherever this 2 number is there, this is agriculture. Okay. Now industry. So wherever 3 you can see here, so this is under industry. Now residences, wherever 4 you see, so this is comes under residences. Okay. So this is how the in-grid model will look like. It will be in the form of numbers. So each of these 4 attributes would have to be separated out of individual layer. One layer would stand for agriculture only with ones and zeros, representing the presence of, absence of activity for each grid cells. Either if you want to show only one layer in sense, suppose this is your grid. If you want to show one layer, for example, if you want to show agriculture, so let us say 1, 1, 1, 1, like this. These are all agriculture. One is agriculture. Now, wherever you find 0, 0 means absence of agriculture. Okay. So either it is 1, either it is 0. So this is how I was telling you about, like lake, wherever 1 is there, lake. 2, you can see 1 is here. Okay. 2 is like this. You can see 2 here. 2. So wherever 2 is there, that is road. 3 is agriculture. 4 is residential. I hope you understood. So this is called as in-grid model. Grid model is through the color representation. So this is called as in-grid model. Now coming to the map model. So the map model is like, where is the simplest way? The grid third raster GIS data model is map model, and this is like with name they represent. So developed by formally integrates the advantages of above two raster data structures methods. This data model, each thematic coverage is recorded and separately mapped by name. So each data is recorded through name. Suppose there is a grid here. So the entire map will be with a single theme. Single theme. So what single theme? So this map model will be the single theme. If it is vegetation, the whole map will be with the same color. Whole map with the same color. So this is called as map models. Same color is vegetation. So entire grids will be covered with vegetation. Okay. So this is also one form of representation of the raster model. So this is accomplished by recording each variable map unit of coverage theme as a separate number of code or label. So which can be accessed individually when the coverage is retrieved. Okay. So this is how the map is created. So map model is like single theme is only represented. So if you want to show roads, only roads will be represented. Only forest, if you want to show, only forest will be represented. If you want to show only water body will be represented. So this is how it will represent in the map model. So I hope you understood what are the different data models in raster GIS. We have a grid model, in-grid model and map model. So what is raster GIS? Raster GIS is representing the data in the form of grid formats. Each cell is having a different DN numbers, digital numbers, which will show the features present in that. So it can be represented either in the grid, in-grid or map. So these are the three types of GIS data model, raster GIS data models. So these are the references you can just go through to find out the more content. You can find out this all information in the M&G Reddy Remote Sensing and GIS with BS publication. Rest all, if you want additional information, you can just go through this link. Okay, this links you can go through, and in any more information you can go through this Tangchang GIS DMH publications and corporation book for the more content. Right. So that's all for today. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.